A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as joining me in segment number 2, it is Sean Paul. He does tremendous work over at the Field of 68. Coupled with that, he is now at Action Network doing a great job taking a look at this tremendous game of college basketball. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to take a little bit of a look at the Sunday card. On top of that, we're going to get some of his reactions from the first week of the season. Some of the teams that have impressed him, some of the teams that, well, they have not impressed him so much. So we're going to have a grand time with Sean in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @JNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a great day of college basketball on Saturday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
The trend of these big, giant favorites covering, for the most part, it's holding true. Houston, they opened up right around about a 31 or so point favorite. They closed more around 33.5. So on the closing line, they did not cover, but still take care of business outright. 82-50. The final as this Houston defense just continues to pound teams into oblivion. They did go 20 of 34 from the free throw line, which did prevent the cover, but you still had Javier Francis give you 13 points, 5 blocks. He was rock solid. And then LJ Cryer, he was able to knock down a pair of threes, 15 points. All in all, good performance for Houston, who was able to induce Texas A&M Corpus Christi into 17 turnovers, and Corpus Christi, they had 19 made buckets. That is typically a recipe for success. Creighton, as a big favorite, they were able to get the job done against North Dakota State, 89-60, the final, as they were about 25.5 point favorites, and North Dakota State actually goes 6 of 14 from three-point range. Bowden Skunberg, though, held 4 points, and for North Dakota State, they lose a rebound battle, 36-22. You had Trey Alexander be able to supply 21 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, 5 steals. Really good performance there. Ryan Kalkbrenner, he didn't need to play too much in this one. 28 minutes, 13 points, and Creighton, they were able to roll. And then UConn, they were steamed up to right around about 38.5 point favorites. They cover all those numbers. 107-67 over Stonehill, and Stonehill actually had a chance to be able to cover this game late. They were down around 34 points with about 2:30 remaining, and UConn, they were able to put in those late buckets to be able to get the cover, as Stonehill does go 9 of 25 from three-point range. UConn, though, they were able to just completely roll on the glass. They win that battle 42-26. Donovan Clingan in this one, 16 points, 7 boards in just 16 minutes. So UConn easing them back after that offseason injury. You had Alex Caravan chipping in there 15 points, Tristan Newton 22 points. So a very impressive performance overall. And then in terms of the non-ranked teams, you did see some very good performances as well. Bowling Green, they were able to get a win and cover 81-75 in the battle of new coaches, like what Todd Simon is doing over there at Bowling Green. And for Bowling Green, being able to lift them to victory, 26 big points out of Marcus Hill, a little bit of a non-D1 transfer that has come in and has looked very good for Bowling Green, and Bowling Green won the turnover battle by kind of 10-6, and they were able to win the rebound battle as well. So that was something that was quite encouraging. You did see a pretty sizable underdog be able to get the job done a little bit later on in the card. Holy Cross. How about Holy Awesome if you took the money line? 68-67. Bad day for the Big East. I'll get into that in a minute. But for Holy Cross, they win this game going just 5 of 20 from three-point range. Joe Octave, 33 points, 11 rebounds. And for Georgetown, they actually go 11 of 29 from 3. They turn the ball over just 4 times. But also for Holy Cross, they win the rebound battle 41-31 as Supreme Cook, he did have 10 rebounds. Really, nobody else for Georgetown was able to do a solid job. Rowan Brumba, Jaden Epps, they were able to combine for 39 points. But Bo Montgomery as well, 15 points, 8 boards. And for Holy Cross, they go 13 of 16 at the free throw line, 12 of 19 for Georgetown. That was the difference. DePaul, they got down 20 points early on in their game against Long Beach State. Long Beach State, they had to hold on for dear life, but they get the outright win, 77-73. Elijah Fisher, sure, did put in their 23 points for DePaul, but for Long Beach State, it was all about the Trayers. Abubakar and Lassine Trayer, they combined for 29 points, 20 rebounds, and then for Long Beach State, they go just 4 of 14 from three-point range, but DePaul, they were just 7-21 from three, wasn't too much better for themselves, and the starters for DePaul just really didn't provide you too much, as the starters, they were darn near outscored by the bench, 38 points from their starters, 35 points off the bench. So Long Beach State with a nice outright winner. Our DK Network write-up pick, that stays hot, 5-2 on the season with those. So we're going to continue to look to move the pendulum forward, in the words of the great Cam Newton, as you had Kent State get the job done against Fresno State by a count of 79-69. In this one for Fresno State, they actually shot uncharacteristically good as well. They shoot 60% from the floor, going 27-45, 7-16 from three. Kent State, they just got more possessions. They went 11 of 27 from three-point range, and for Fresno State, here's what doomed them. 22 turnovers. Kent State, one of the better teams of the country at being up 4 turnovers a season ago. That held true here, and you did see a few underdogs be able to come through on the late slate on Saturday. I was getting to a pair of the Big East teams that fell. You saw Providence be able to get the win, but no cover against UW-Milwaukee, 79-69, the final. As for UW-Milwaukee, BJ Freeman, who was awesome for the team towards the back half of the season, he was able to deliver 33 points, 10 rebounds for Providence. They do win that rebound battle by a count of 45-39, and they win the turnover battle 13-12, but for Providence, just 10 of 31 from three-point range. Solid performance out of Josh Oduro, 13 points, 12 rebounds, but UW-Milwaukee, they're going to be a plucky team all season long. That was a solid cover for them. UNLV, after they looked all sorts of awful against Southern in their season opener, a little bit better, 71-55. They take down Stetson. Stetson last year was very much a team that played at a slower tempo, but they were able to put the ball in the basket, just 7 of 31 from 3, and Stephon Swinson, he has 8 assists, 6 rebounds, and 3 turnovers, but 0 of 13 from the floor. UNLV, not like they were amazing. They go 10 of 31 from 3, but how about Jalen Hill coming in with 14 points, 13 rebounds? So a nice little bounce back for UNLV. Teams that rolled, Loyola Chicago as a big favorite against Eastern Illinois, 89-65 after they had a little bit of a rough night, number 1 against FAU. Wyoming and their home court remains strong, 80-66. They were able to take it to Cal Poly, and for Wyoming, you'd have Cam Manyawu, hopefully I said that correctly, provide 19 points. I know that Wyoming, very bullish on their non-D1 transfers. Looks like he's going to be a big one of them. And then something else that did stand out to me, UC Irvine. They were really able to take it to New Mexico State, 91-74. Always want to be taking a look at chemistry early on during the season, and for New Mexico State, they pretty much did not return a single player from a season ago. And for New Mexico State, they actually go 7-16 from three-point range, but Irvine, Zot for the Anteaters, 10 of 23 from three-point range. Devin Tills, 18 points, 10 rebounds. Bent Lutken only had 4 points in this one, and yet team was still able to roll. So that was one of those results that really did stand out to me. Also as quite a bit of an underdog, Bucknell outright over Niagara, 73-64. They're under the tutelage of John Griffin, who used to play there at the program as 9.5-point underdogs. They were able to get it done, and a big reason why. How about Noah Williamson? The 7-footer was able to give the team 22 points, 11 rebounds. They out-rebound Niagara 36-16. That is a good recipe for success. So Niagara, they did have Ahmad Henderson the second. He was able to come in 28 points for the freshman. So certainly someone that I'm going to be taking a little bit more note of moving forward. And something else to take note of as well. Looks like Canisius is going to be very rock solid. They covered a few nights ago against Syracuse. They found themselves as an 11.5-point underdog against St. Bonaventure. They get it done by a count of 70-67, outright on the money line, going 12 of 24 from 3. Now, I don't think they can count on 12 of 24 from 3 for the entirety of the season, but Trey Dinkins, he was able to be in flamethrower mode in this one, 16 points. He was able to drill, I believe it was a quartet of threes after he had 17 points in that game against Syracuse. Meanwhile, for St. Bonaventure, 4 of 20 from 3. And these are the sorts of things that you do want to be taking note of. They play that game again. St. Bonaventure probably able to pull off an outright win. Do they pull off a cover? Most likely not, but that was very much a demonstrative shooting performance, to say the least, from a Canisius team that in a Metro Atlantic that appears to be very wide open. It looks like they're going to be contenders, a team that's hoping to be a little bit of a contender out there in the Metro Atlantic as well. That would be Siena. And for Siena, they found themselves as pretty sizable underdogs on Saturday, and boy, did they get drilled. 90-48. Richmond just completely pounded the tar out of them. Michael Ely currently out of the fold for Siena. They went 4 of 20 from three-point range, and Richmond, the Itsy Bitsy Spiders, 10 of 18 from three-point range, with Isaac Bigelow being able to go off for 17 points. Also out there in the Metro Atlantic, you had St. Peter's on the road take it to NJIT, as sans Siena, it was actually a pretty good day for the Metro Atlantic, 75-48, and it looks like that NJIT rebuild is going to take a long, long time. St. Peter's 30 of 34 from the free throw line. Still has their issues from downtown, 5 of 20 from three-point range, but you're able to get 23 points, 10 boards, double-double out of Corey Washington to be able to get it done. And then Marist on the road against UMBC, 65-59. UMBC was a small favorite. I felt like Marist should have been a bit more of the favorite, as Marist goes 6 of 19 from three-point range, and for UMBC, a paltry 3 of 20, as they had a lot of roster turnover from what they were able to do last season. I believe 5 out of their top 6 scorers from a season ago being out of the fold. And then another nice little plucky underdog, Loyola Maryland, someone that I talked up in the offseason from the Patriot League, 77-65. Outright over Brown, going 9 of 22 from three-point range. And for Loyola Maryland, they do lose a rebound battle 46-40. But if you look at the front court of Brown, that's really not too bad of a showing. And for Loyola Maryland, 21 points, 9 assists, 3 steals out of Dion Perry to be able to lead the way. So that was absolutely explosive for them. Do want to point out as well, Cornell out there in the Ivy League to be able to give a little bit of redemption to Brown. 78-73. Nice road win over Fordham. Fordham goes 9 of 28 from 3, and Cornell does seem like they're going to play at a little bit of a slower tempo this year, though, the 20 turnovers. That was really a big reason why they didn't put up as many points in this one, but they go 7 of 18 from three-point rangers, still going right around 10 deep, so that is certainly one that I am taking note of as well. And also take note of UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington has been one of your best covered teams in all of college basketball over the last few years, and if you date it back to the beginning of the 2021-22 season, UNC Wilmington now 41-24-2 against the spread. They win, and they win big against UNC Asheville by a count of 83-66, going 8 of 20 from three-point range. For Wilmington, you had 5 different guys in double figures. One of those holes greater than some of its sports teams. And for UNC Asheville, 17 turnovers. And despite having Drew Pember out there on the floor at 19 points, 11 rebounds, got plowed on glass 35-23. And then, oh yeah, we can't forget, Notre Dame loses on their home floor to Western Carolina, 71-61. It's going to be a rough one for Notre Dame this season. They were able to get 17 points out of Marcus Burton. Looks like he's going to be a good start for them moving forward. But Fontavious Wilbright, 22 points, 11 rebounds. Western Carolina, no joke out there in the SoCon. And you also saw Arizona State get up off the mat after they had a very bad showing on national TV against Mississippi State. They don't get the cover, but they looked stout on defense against Texas Southern, 63-52. And I'm not sure what it is, but it feels like Bobby Hurley in every progressing year at Arizona State, the defense has gotten better and the offense has gotten worse. And for Texas Southern, they might want to rethink this strategy. PJ Henry overall is a solid scorer, but 5 of 24 from the floor for 12 points. That's a half a point per field goal attempt. That is not very efficient, to say the least. Arizona State did lose a rebound battle 49-44, but Texas Southern did a big, giant nothing burger with it. And that team that was able to knock off Arizona State a few days ago, Mississippi State, they win and they cover 87-63 as well. And if you are taking a look at college basketball, I was highlighting this a little bit towards the top. Favorites continue to roll. We've seen a little bit of progression with these underdogs, but still, favorites. 151, 135, and 5 against the spread. And bigger than that, it's home teams that have been very good, hitting at 53.1% thus far this season. The overs, they continue to be white hot as well. We have seen 161 overs, 126 unders, and I believe that we have now had 2 pushes along the way as well. So that is what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's chat with our good friend Sean Paul. Take a look at some of the teams that have stood out to him the first week of the season. We're going to be diving in on Sunday's games. We're also going to be getting his thoughts on the fouls and the just gob ton of fouls we have seen in these games early on during the season as well. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the UC Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the UC Family Podcast. It is great to be joined by this man, as Sean Paul. He does absolutely tremendous work taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's over there at the Field of 68 doing some good writing there, doing their mid-major show. On top of that, I know that he's over at Action Network doing a great job to look at all of their college basketball coverage as well. To be able to follow Sean on Twitter/X. That's at Sean Paul CBB, and Sean is spelled S-E-A-N. There's a lot of spellings for Sean. This, in my opinion, is the most traditional of them, and Sean...
The only correct one, the only one we acknowledge here, right, Greg?
Yes, sir. Always great to have you aboard, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me, and Sean, it has been an interesting start to the season, and on Friday, we got a lot of really good games. I was very glad to see that. I'd like to maybe see a few more of those games night number 1, but you know what, season gets kicked off to a nice start, but with that said, as we're through the first few days of the college basketball season, have there been any real big takeaways for you? Because I do think that it has been fascinating to see these top teams coming out in full force.
In terms of the Big Ten, I have a couple teams that I'm more in on and a couple teams that I feel like my expectations kind of back up right now, because Indiana is one team. After watching them against Florida Gulf Coast without Isaiah Thompson, I came away incredibly discouraged. Like, they didn't look very good at all. And those problems that I thought were going to happen happened. One of the reasons why I didn't think this team would be that good is because the shooting was always questionable. Their guard play outside of Xavier Johnson was questionable. And I just didn't know how a guy like Malik Renew and Khalil Ware could coexist. And I don't think they really can to lead Indiana to a deep run in the NCAA tournament if they can even get there. I honestly don't know if this is a tournament game. I was so not impressed by what they did the other day. And one of the things to me that stood out is you're adding Mackenzie Mbako, top 10, top 15 recruit, 5-star guy who was committed to Duke. The reason that a lot of people like this Indiana team is because people thought he would be a huge piece. But his best ability is to be like a stretch 4, can shoot it. But he's playing the 3 on this team, and he doesn't have that kind of athleticism to reliably play the 3. He's not an elite enough shooter to play the 3. That's just not his position. So we played 18 minutes in this game. And Gabe Cupps was the freshman who played the most minutes, and I really like him. I thought he was impressive. He made a really nice pass to the corner, ended up in a missed 3. But when he has that kind of IQ where he can make those big-time plays as a freshman, but Mbako barely played. He didn't make a 3, and the one shot he did make, it was like a curl screen that he took a mid-range 2 on. That's not what we're doing in modern-day college basketball. Like, if you're doing a curl screen that hit a 2, that's like 1980s stuff. What are we doing here? Like, this floor spacing was awful. Khalil Ware and Renew were posting up at the same time. There was no floor spacing. It was ugly.
Yeah, it was really ugly. And with Indiana coming into the year, I thought they would be solid down low just because they had so many options, but I was sort of out on that backcourt as well. And to your point, didn't love what I saw of Indiana against Florida Gulf Coast. So I will say, was somewhat impressed by Florida Gulf Coast as well. And I do think that
no doubt. They deserve some credit, but that was ugly. If you're playing without Isaiah Thompson, that's huge. And like Dalian Johnson looked great. He's going to be a big piece for them with Chase Johnston and Isaiah Thompson and Keyshawn Kellman down low. They have pieces, but like Indiana had enough size and athleticism to dominate that game, and they just didn't.
They did not. As joining me on the show, we do have Sean Paul. He does great work over at Action Network. Along with that, the Field of 68 joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how much is that just part of it this time of year as well? Because I was just alluding to it. I think that it's very fair to be critical of Indiana, what happened night number one. I'm right there with you. I expected more out of them. I personally laid the points and they were not able to come through. But I do think that in a lot of these games, you can both be off-put by a team, and you can also be a little bit encouraged by a team as well. And I do think that there have been plenty of examples, like I look at that Quinnipiac versus Central Connecticut game on Friday as well, where you can be sort of encouraged by a team, even though you might be also out on a team at the same time as well.
Yeah, I do get that to a certain extent. That Central Connecticut game you mentioned, it was a pretty nice comeback for Central Connecticut. They had a pretty rough first half, and Kellen Amos and Alan Jean Rose really settled in that second half, and they were able to make it a competitive game. Only played 9 guys, really short bench, but their starting 5 looks pretty solid. Jean Rose and Amos are going to be 2 really good players for them. So I'm expecting an improved season. They were like bottom 20 in Ken Palm last year. I think they will be a lot better. And another one where I came away impressed to a certain degree by both teams was Iona against Charleston on opening night. Iona looked really good without Osborne Shima, who's going to be like their number 1 scoring option. Greg Gordon had like 18 and 13. He shot it like 25 times, but he was a really good player for them in the opener. The JUCO transfer from Dyersburg State. Iden Tratu was really good. Joel Brown was solid. Jeremiah Quigley, a freshman guard, played huge minutes late in that game. And then Charleston, Ante Brizovic didn't start, but he came off the bench. He looked really solid. Frankie Pulicelli led the team in scoring. Their guard play left a little bit to be desired with C.J. Fulton and Kobe Rogers. They didn't really live up to my expectations in that one, and they're currently not doing so well against Duquesne. But I still think they're going to be a really good team long term.
Yep, I do think that they're going to be a very good team long term. And what else I think is going to be interesting to take a look at moving forward as well is something that I've been tracking. And Sean, I know that you've been taking a little bit of a look at this as well. It does feel like a lot of these big favorites against, let's call it what it is, outmatched competition, where you have like insert your power conference team here laying north of 20 points. I feel like tons of them have just been able to get the job done. They've been able to cover. They've been able to win by wide margins. And I do think that the top of college basketball is really showing its might right now. I'm not sure if that's been a little bit of a takeaway for you the first few days, but I really noticed that these top teams, they've really been able to back it up, sans a few exceptions like Michigan State.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Michigan against UNC Asheville, that's one where I really like Michigan because their athleticism and size is going to be a problem for Asheville. And if they could get Drew Pember in foul trouble, it wasn't going to be a good night for the Bulldogs, and that's exactly what happened. And then you look at a team like Iowa State, they have completely steamrolled 2 pretty lousy opponents, to say it nicely, but 44-point win over Green Bay, like a 50-point win over Lindenwood. They've dominated so far. Taman Lipsey's looking like one of the better guards in the Big 12. I really like what I've seen from them, but it certainly looks like a lot of the 20-point favorites are showing why they're 20-point favorites outside of, like you said, Michigan State. Georgia Tech was only 10-point favorites yesterday, but Howard controlled that game for a majority of it. A lot of teams have really shown why they're 20-point favorites, though. I feel like it's been a little bit different compared to other years because if you see like a 25-point number, you're like, it's a lot of points. You know, I get a 25-point head start. But then you see Samford go down 24-1 in the first 10 minutes of the game against Purdue. And you're like, okay, we're probably in trouble here.
Yeah, I've been noticing that a lot as well because I have been someone that in past years, I love taking that big giant bullshit of points because typically it's like, all right, this team is outmatched, but at the same time, this final 5 minutes, your power conference team might be up 20 points. They put on all the walk-ons. Everyone gets a cheer for the first appearance of the year for insert.
Steven Izzo.
Yeah, even with that, yeah. I mean, this year that has not been the case thus far, and that has been something that has stood out to me. And how much have you been taking a look at this little bit of an angle as well? Because it has been something that I've been talking about on this podcast quite a bit. It does feel like these games are being called quite a bit more tight to begin the season than we typically see. And typically the whistle is blown a little bit more when it comes to these non-conference games, but I'm really noticing an uptick in fouls and free throws here in the first week of the season.
I'm already over the block charge thing. It's been, I know some people want the charge banned, I get it, but this is extreme. I've seen some very clear charges. I feel like this is part of the reason why there's been an uptick in free throws because everything's a block. Like, there's been some clear charges sitting there for 5 minutes, takes a charge. They're like, that's going to be a block. That's 2 free throws in the bonus. I just don't get why we have to go so extreme. If you want the charge out of the game, just ban it. Don't do this, because one of two things is going to happen. They're going to start calling it normally again after the point of emphasis thing is gone, because they do that every single year. They have a point of emphasis, and then we all forget about it by January. Or they're just going to keep calling it the same way, and it's going to be a complete mess, because there's going to be a charge in an NCAA tournament game that's a clear charge, and it ends up being a blocking foul, and it'll change the outcome of that game. I mean, Drew Timmy's charge a couple of years ago against Johnny Juzang in that Final Four, that's probably a block today. Like, UCLA's probably playing Baylor for the national championship. So I would just like to see that called a little differently, and I know I'm probably in the minority there. I know many people probably just want to see charges out of the game, but there's a certain level of IQ it takes to take those charges. Like, Jalen Williams was so good with it at Arkansas. He was a great defender already, and being able to set up for charges made him even better. And I think a certain thing to it, if players practice jump stops and stuff like that where they could avoid charges, this wouldn't be an issue. But a lot of them don't put work into that kind of stuff, and they just barrel into players, and now they're getting rewarded for it. I think you can look at it on both sides of the token. I'm going to say that the blocking fouls have been a little annoying, and I prefer it stops a little bit, but that's probably just me.
Yep, it has been something that I've been taking note of as well, and I'm right there with you. I think that you need to go all or nothing. Trying to do what they're doing right now, it's just causing for these games to be just a little bit less watchable than what they typically are. So I've been not necessarily a fan of that as well, but I am always a fan of getting Sean Paul this podcast. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. Does an amazing job taking a look at the great game of college basketball. And Sean, we're doing this just before the Sunday games, in which we do have some interesting games going on. And I know that you were a little bit off put by Indiana. They're a team that's going to be going up against Army. And if they have trouble with Army, boy, then we're really looking at having some issues, as Army is completely gutted from last year. But a team that I thought looked a little bit wonky in the first game of the season is going to be take the floor as well. I'm not seeing any sort of betting line on this one as of now, but it's North Carolina going up against Lehigh, and Lehigh did not have the world's most savory start to the season as well, getting pounded by Cornell to begin the season in a game in which they allowed 84 points. Cornell was clearly able to get a little bit more of their tempo in that game. How do you view this game and North Carolina as a whole? Because I do feel like with North Carolina, bringing in a lot of guys that played at a little bit of a slower tempo was a very interesting choice in the transfer portal.
It's just going to take time for those guys to play North Carolina's tempo, play that higher tempo. Like Harrison Ingram, obviously coming from a school that played a pretty slow tempo. Paxton Wojcik, Cormac Ryan, like all those guys will probably take a little bit of time to get used to what North Carolina does. But that's why you have experienced vets like Armando Bacon, RJ Davis to help them learn that. It'll take time, but they'll get there. They looked really impressive in that second half against Radford. I didn't think they would come out as slow as they did, but they really locked down defensively in that second half against a team who has some really good guards, like Daquan Smith, Kenyon Giles, and Brian Antoine are 3 really good guards. Like, that's the best backcourt in the Big South. Obviously, you need to beat Radford, which they did pretty handily at the end of it, but it started slow, and I was impressed by what I saw in that second half. So if they're able to come in and dominate Lehigh like I think they will, their size will probably be a little bit overwhelming in that one, then I continue to feel pretty good about North Carolina long term. I'd like to see a little bit more James Okonkwo. He played 1 minute in that win against Radford, garbage time minutes. I would like to see him get a little more minutes than Jalen Withers. I just think he's a better player for this system. We'll see if that ends up happening. But North Carolina is a team I do like long term.
Yep, and with Okonkwo, he did come over a little bit late because he was a part of that exodus that happened with West Virginia. So we shall see if he sees a little bit more playing time moving forward. But I do think that that is going to be one of intrigue for Sunday, after we really had a lot of our best games actually go down on Friday. A little bit of a rarity in college basketball, but you're going to be finding that a little bit more when it comes to non-conference play, and we shall see what we get in these Asheville championship games as well. But I also do think that this one is intriguing as well. It's the Washington versus Nevada game. Sean, you're a man that is very close to the campus of Nevada. Nevada was able to come out night number 1, and they got a solid win against a Sacramento State team that isn't great, but they always make things just so butt ugly. Meanwhile, for Washington, impressive night number 1, and I know that they didn't cover against Northern Kentucky, but I do think that Northern Kentucky is a good team, a team that has a chance to make some noise in the rise. And like, how do you view this one? Because Washington is one of those teams that I think can ascend a little bit, and with Washington, I do think the biggest key for this team is their size down low.
I'm going to say this. Mike Hopkins, we can agree here. Mike Hopkins is a pretty bad basketball coach, right? We're on the same
Not
page here.
great. Not great.
This actually, like, I wrote about it for Action. I took Washington against Northern Kentucky. And the reason I took them, I was really encouraged by what Paul Mulcahy and Corin Johnson did. I'm like, if Sabir Wheeler plays, he missed the first game, maybe he'll play like 20 minutes. He plays 36 minutes. Paul Mulcahy played 25 minutes. And Corin Johnson, who had 25 against Bellarmine, had 20 minutes. Why are we playing Sabir Wheeler, who has proven he's not that good of a college basketball player, over two guys that led you to victory over Bellarmine? I just don't get what we're doing there. Braxton Mia barely played. His rotations are a complete disaster. He is a bad basketball coach, and it continues to show time and time again. Like, I don't know how you take away from the first game that you need to give Corin Johnson and Paul Mulcahy less minutes, but somehow Mike Hopkins did. And at this point, if he survives past this season, based on how they look, I would be surprised. I was really encouraged in the first game, but if he's going to keep messing with the rotations like this and not keeping what works in there, then he's not going to have a good season. But for this game alone, Washington against Nevada. Nevada is a pretty young front court with Jazz Gardner. He got the starting nod in that one. He hadn't played a single game of D1 college basketball before that. He is a freshman that's 7 foot, 7 points, 8 rebounds. That's pretty solid in 14 minutes of action. And they have their veteran guard, Jared Lucas, who can shoot it. Keenan Blackshear, who's your point guard, big point guard. I think in this kind of game, you need to put Sabir Wheeler on the bench against the size of Nevada. Put Paul Mulcahy against Keenan Blackshear because that's a really tall point guard matchup, 6'5" for Mulcahy, 6'6" for Blackshear. But they're going to need some scoring from the other pieces, like a Trey Coleman's going to have to step up, Hunter McIntosh, Nick Davidson. Those guys are really going to have to step up in this one. But I want to see Washington just use their size because that's what they have a ton of. If they started Mulcahy, like that roster they had on the first day, they had 4 guys that were 6'5" or bigger in the starting lineup. Corin Johnson was the only starter that was below that, and he's 6 foot. So you have your speedy, talented scoring guard. You have a skilled point guard who's a good floor general. You have Keon Brooks, who's proven to be a really good scorer. You have Wilhelm Bradenbach, who's a solid player. He's more of an offensive piece, but you have Braxton Mee in front, Kepnong. You can mix in there as well as more defensive pieces. And you have Moses Wood, who can stretch the floor and shoot the 3-ball. I like Washington with that roster a lot more than I do with Sabir Wheeler because they have so much size. If Hopkins is going more zone that game, they have a lot of length to get into the passing lanes. For this game, I'm going to take Washington because I think what Nevada does well, which is having a ton of size, Washington can easily combat that with more size. So I think I don't know what the number is, probably like 5 or 6. I would take Washington up to like 6.5.
Yeah, and I do think that is going to be such an interesting matchup. We are doing this before openers come out, but I tend to agree with you there. And how do you view just the overall look of the Pac-12? Because I really like what I'm seeing out of USC these first few nights, being able to get that win by double figures against Kansas State. I think Kansas State was just a touch over value coming into the season because they did have a lot of moving parts, but I'm still an impressive win.
That was huge, not having
Tomlin. I'm right there with you. I think that is big as well, but overall, I think that this conference is going to be running through USC, and I just take a look at the rest.
Really?
I do think so. I think that USC is number 1. I've got Arizona as a very clear number 2, and everyone else is fighting for number 3.
Wow. Okay. And no, I like it. That's different, though. Like, most people have, like, Arizona in their Final Four. I put them there, and then, like, me and, like, 90% of college basketball people did it, and I'm just like, that makes me feel less good about it. But I like their team quite a bit. Arizona, that is. USC, same deal. But I see what you see in USC. It wouldn't surprise me if they won the conference. They probably have the best backcourt in college basketball. Like, you have Boogie Ellis, you have Isaiah Collier, who I was trying to think of a comp for during that Kansas State game. And the only one I could really come up with, and it's not a good comp, it's just based on size, is Trevor Keels, because they were both huge and they could drive, they're athletic, they can shoot it, even though Collier's not a great shooter, but Collier's a way better passer. So he's so different. Like, he's built like a linebacker. He can get into the lane and make things happen. He had a couple really nice drop-down passes to Joshua Morgan against Kansas State. He's going to be one of the best guards in the country. And then Boogie Ellis, he's shown time and time again what he can do, and that's absolutely lighted up from outside. 30 feet, no problem for him. Kobe Johnson, though, he, outside of those players, is the most important player on this team with everything he can do defensively. He's just a defensive anchor for that team. They're another team that can go zone occasionally. They like to mix it up a decent amount, and his length in that zone is really good. Joshua Morgan's a great rim protector. DJ Rodman can shoot, and he has size at the 4. Their bench isn't great, and I think if there's an injury that happens to the backcourt, especially with Bronny James out, they're going to be in some trouble. But that starting five is one of the best in college basketball. So I'm really encouraged by them. Oregon, I was really out on to begin the year, but that game against Georgia, it was pretty impressive. They were locking down defensively. I like their Twin Towers combination with Nate Biddle / KJ Evans and Nafali Dante. At first, I was like, is this actually going to work? And I'm like, it is going to work. Like, because Evans can shoot it, Biddle can shoot it. They can space the floor pretty well still. And they have two guys flying in for offensive rebounds with Nafali Dante down low. I think there's enough pieces, and I think Altman knows his guards really aren't very good. So he needs to find other ways to score, and that's getting the ball to your stretch fours and getting it on high lows to Dante and just finding different ways to score it. And defensively, they were just all over the place. And that's how we've seen some of Oregon's better teams be really good throughout the years. So I think Oregon is going to be a lot better than I thought they were. Stanford, not good in that opener against Cal State Northridge. Their defense was pretty poor. Andrei Stojakovic struggled. Their whole offense struggled. I'm hoping that's an outlier because I did really like the Stanford team coming in, but Jared Hass is consistently underachieved. But outside of Oregon State, I'm pretty sure Arizona State is the worst team in this conference. That is a bad basketball team.
Yeah, that was rough to watch from them to begin the season. And with this conference, Oregon State is a rough team. Didn't like what I saw from Stanford night number one as well, because it always feels like they've got talent, and Jared Hass just has not been able to put it.
It's so upsetting. It really is. Oh. I'm just like, how can this team almost lose to Cal State Northridge? It just feels impossible.
And I think that Cal State Northridge is an improved team. I like the hire of Andy Newman.
But it's improved, but like you're Stanford. Like you got to go. I mean, Cannon Carlisle didn't play, but you have Andrei Stojakovic. You have Jared Bynum, you have Maxime Reynaud, you have Spencer Jones. Like, you should win that game by 15. They won by 8, but they were losing with like 3 minutes left.
Yeah, and the spread was north of 20. I had to take the points there with CISA, and I'm just like, I can't trust it. Jared Hass covering this number, obviously, turned out to be correct, but right there with you, it's a little bit upsetting, but what always encourages me is getting you on this show, Sean. You do an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball, and would like to give you the floor here. Let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I've definitely been getting an uptick in my writing this year. I've written 11 previews this week for Action, so make sure to check all those out. I'll be having a lot more throughout the season, so check me out there, Action Network. You can follow me on Twitter at SeanPaulCBB. Field of 68 Mid-Major Show with Brian Burton and myself. That's going to be a good one. Just make sure you tune to everything I got, and I'm sure I'll be back on here pretty soon with Greg Peterson.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to get Sean on throughout the season, and that's a good duo right there. Sean and Brian, two of the best at taking a look at mid-major college basketball, so you do want to be tuning in there, and with Sean, he does such a great job taking a look at this game that we all know and love. So big thanks to Sean for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to get Sean Paul aboard. He does amazing work over at the Field of 68. Also does a tremendous job over at Action Network, taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love. Does an amazing job, one of the best in the business, at taking a look at these mid-majors. And as I always say on this show / podcast, doesn't matter whether you're betting on like Duke versus North Carolina or if you're betting on Nichols versus LSU. Money is money. You're able to make it some on every single one of these teams. So it is always appreciated to get Sean Paul aboard. A big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter /X feed at GNet_81. We are going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits first, and then the games involving smaller conferences. This is the Northeast Conference, the Patriot League, the Southland. You're able to throw in there the MEAC, the SWAC. Chicago State is an independent. These are the games that are going to be at the bottom. So how about if we get things started with 701, 702 on the betting board? It is Eastern Washington on the road facing off against Cincinnati. Yes, we are on to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati on to being 14.5 to 15.5 point favorites. Your total on this game, finding it anywhere between about a 152 to a 152.5. I did set my total at 143. Cincinnati is a little bit more of a defense-oriented team under Wes Miller. Recognize that they played a bit more up-tempo last season, and they were able to put up 93 against Detroit. I think that just speaks how bad Detroit is on defense. And for Cincinnati, they are going to be a little bit more guard-oriented this year because they did not have Aziz Bendango be able to get his waiver. They're without Jamile Reynolds as well, so that means that you're going to be relying upon someone like Kalu Ezikpe, a bit more down low. They've got Simius Lucasius, a nice little combo player that last year at Butler was able to shoot about 38% from three-point range. And got to think that Jizzle James, the freshman and the son of Edrin James, is going to be seeing quite a bit more time in the backcourt. 13 points in 19 minutes in that game against Detroit, like what I'm seeing there, but going to be willing to take the points with Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington, they've got a lot of guys that were around last season, and they've got a lot of good versatility. Darren Erikstrup, someone who's 6'10", began his career at the D2 level. He's been able to give the team a double-figure amount of points per game these first two games. He's able to pop some threes, and then I like what you're able to get out of Cedric Coward. Coward last season shot 39.5% from three, 5.5 boards as a 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all player. Now, with Seal Venters out of the fold, you do have to be wondering how this team is going to be able to function without necessarily that go-to scorer, but Elias Magnuson, he's a very good pass-first guard. Someone who I still remember as a freshman was able to give out 4 assists per contest, has never really averaged more than 5.5 points per contest, and last year he just fell out of favor in general, but this year looks like he's going to be getting more minutes as just more of that primary facilitator. Jake Hyman, someone who began his career at UCLA, I like his overall upside. Now Cincinnati, even with all those guys out of the fold, they should be able to win the battle down low with Victor Lakeen, but still, I do think that Eastern Washington, they're going to be looking to throttle back a little bit as well with not having Seal Venters in the fold. And this is an early 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific time game, so a little bit of a body clock game for Eastern Washington. I do think that that slows down the tempo in this game, but even with it being a body clock game, I do think that Eastern Washington holds in there. Set this line at 9.5. I think that Cincinnati is overvalued here. I'm going to be taking a look at Eastern Washington catching the points and set my total 143.5, diving under. 7-3, 7-4 on the betting board. Idaho State plays Idaho St. Idaho State is an underdog of 24.5 to 25.5 points. Between 128.5 and 129.5 is your total. Did set this line at 20.5. Iowa State was able to pound the tar out of Lindenwood, and in their first two games, they were able to win by 35 plus. But I do think that Iowa State is going to be able to hold in there. Lost by 1 on the road against St. Thomas. Really no shame in that. And it's an Idaho State team that, unlike the first two teams that Iowa State faced off against, they bring back a lot of their pieces from last year, like a Miguel Tomley. Tomley is not like the world's greatest facilitator or anything like that, but he had like 2 assists, 11.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range a season ago. Braden Parker is going to lose the battle down low, but it's not like Iowa State is necessarily going to be some just dominant rebounding team. Trey King, I think, is going to be able to elevate the team a little bit. And then the freshman in Milan Mamosilovic, he comes in from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. He has looked tremendous for Iowa State. Do think we're going to see a little bit of regression with this Iowa State three-point shooting, 39.5%. I just don't think that they're quite this good of a three-point shooting team, though. No doubt about it. Bringing in Keyshawn Gilbert, that elevates what was a little bit of a rough shooting team from a season ago. He over at UNLV a season ago, 11.5 points, a little bit over 3 assists, shot nearly 39% from three-point range. And Tamon Lipsby looks to be a better scorer this year than he was a season ago. Last year was good at doling out the ball, getting steals. Now he's been able to put in there about 33 points in the first 2 games of the season. You've got Jackson Pavelski, who's a nice backup point guard for this team as well. So Iowa State does have some nice depth, but I do think that Iowa State is going to have a little bit of a tough time as well, breaking away quite as easily as they did in the first 2 games. You've got someone for Idaho State in Kyrie Huey, who comes in as a little bit of a junior college transfer. I like his game at 6'9". He's able to do a nice job on glass, and I do think that Idaho State, because they're going to be able to play not maybe even up, but they're going to be somewhat competitive on the glass, that'll keep them within shouting distance in this one. So I did set my line at 20.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Did set my total at 128.5. Iowa State has been just one of the best offensive teams in all of college basketball. Not a super duper up-tempo team as well, so going to be diving in on this total under, and I'm going to be looking to take the points with Idaho State. 7-5, 7-6 on the betting board. It is Air Force on the road facing off against Delaware. The Blue Hens are between 4.5 and 5-point favorites. Your total between 130.5 and 131.5. Air Force looked pretty solid in their win over Long Island. Long Island on a lot of metrics is a bottom 5 team in college basketball, though it's hard for me to make too much out of that end. Though Delaware has quite a few moving parts, they lose Jameer Nelson Jr. from a season ago. I do like what they're able to get out of Calvin Riley, which is why I did set them as a 7-point favorite. Riley a season ago was an off-the-ball guy that shot about 45.5% from three-point range, and now they're putting the ball in his hands quite a bit. He, in the first 2 games of the season, has been able to deliver 29 points. Love his game. And then they bring in Gerald Drumgoole. He was over at Albany a season ago. At Albany, 15.5 points per contest, but darn near 18-plus points per game in conference play a season ago. You've got Christian Ray, who's not a great scorer, but was able to give the team 8-plus boards per contest a season ago. And Air Force, they just don't have a lot down low. You bring back Raitis Petratus. He's able to give you a little bit of rebounding, but he has been out of the fold for the first few games of the season. I do like what Ethan Taylor is able to bring to the table last season. Honestly, last 2 seasons has been a starter for the team, but saw a little bit of a drop-off from his freshman to his sophomore year as a freshman. Really looked like he was going to take off. Nearly 5 boards, 8.5 points, steal and a half per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooter, but you just don't have much around him. This has always been an Air Force team that's had a tough time rebounding. They play at a very slow, controlled style, and they just lose a lot of that 3-point shooting that they had a season ago. They are really going to be looking to Bo Becker to be able to elevate this. Becker last season shot about 34% from 3 with 7.5 points per contest, but with Air Force just not having a lot on the glass, Christian Ray should be able to have a field day down low. And Jelon Trent coming over from North Dakota is just a do-it-all player. Doesn't really score a lot, but he gives you assists, he gives you rebounds. Air Force, I just think it's going to have a tough time matching up with that. I did set Delaware as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Delaware, not an up-tempo team. Defense sometimes leaves a little bit of something to be desired, but not a game that I see having a lot of possessions in Air Force. One of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. I made my total 131, so going to be taking a look at the under on 131.5. I'd rather have that under rather than an over of 130.5. And with Delaware, willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 707, 708 on the betting board. Texas Tech is playing OC San Jose State. San Jose State between a 14 to a 15.5 point underdog. Your total between a 130 and 132.5. San Jose State is a little bit banged up, but I do feel like this number has gotten out of whack. I set mine at 14, so I'm going to be willing to take anything north of 14 in this ordeal. San Jose State, they do lose Amari Moore, the Mountain West Player of the Year from a season ago, and they have been dealing with an injury to Robert Viola. He's really their top returning rebounder from a season ago, but I do like the pieces in the backcourt. Someone like a Myron Armani is someone that a season ago was limited to just 9 games after 2 seasons ago, was able to take off with 9.5 points, was a good 37.5% 3-point shooter, and Tebek Ronaire, who began his career at Arizona, 6'8", little bit of a combo player that just really didn't find his footing first few years at San Jose State. Looks like he has found that this year, and now you've got a nice facilitator to be able to take over for Mr. Omari Kelly, who's out of the fold, Alvarado Cardenas. Cardenas last season was nice with being able to give out 3.5 assists, 10 points per game. Now he has the ball in his hands quite a bit more, and so far so good for him. Meanwhile, with Texas Tech, you can tell that they have taken on that Grant McCaslin style of playing slow, playing very grimy. We saw that against Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce could only get to you in that game 46 points. Now, it is sort of a mismatch of transfers and guys that were with Texas Tech last year, like Pop Isaacs, is back at the fold. He had 19 points in the season opener, and he looked to play very well with Joe Toussaint, who is about a 10-point per game scorer over at West Virginia. I like the addition of Chance McMillan as well. Played at a little bit more of a slow-tempo school in Grand Canyon a season ago where he shot 44% from 3-point range. So got a lot of nice pieces with Texas Tech, including a 7-footer in Warren Washington, who is going to be able to win the battle down low. But for San Jose State, even with having Viola dealing with the injury, Adrame Diongue, who is a 7-footer that comes in from Senegal, began his career at Washington State. He looks to be that next good rim protector for San Jose State. I do think that this is going to be a slow, grimy game. San Jose State has not been the world's most efficient defense under Tim Miles, but they do play a very slow, distinct style of basketball, and I just don't think there's going to be a lot of possessions in this game. Graham McCaslin, we said at North Texas last year, and that team playing at the slowest pace in all of college basketball. So did set my total at a 130, diving under end, and north of 14, going to be willing to take the points with San Jose State. 709, 710 on the betting board. North Dakota is going to be playing OC Elon. Elon is an underdog of between 5 and 4.5 points in your total, and say between 153.5 and 155. I made Elon the 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them out right on the money line. North Dakota just got completely smoked against Iowa. Now, there's no shame there, but I just take a look at this North Dakota team. I recognize that they've got a little bit of a home court advantage because Elon is going to have quite a bit of travel to be able to get to North Dakota for this one, but past that, they really don't have a lot going for them. North Dakota, they bring back Sonsei Sarste, who last season was able to give the team about 5 rebounds per game. He's the only returning player that gave the team north of 4 boards per contest. Elon, I recognize that they had a horrible second half against Wake Forest, but they did get up 19 points on an ACC school, and that says something to me. You've got Max McKinnon, who might be the best player out there on the floor. He last season was able to log about 11.5 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, steal per contest. BJ Oman on the flip side for North Dakota is able to give you 12 points, but North Dakota also a bottom 40 team last season in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Elon brings in some weapons. Rob Higgins, throughout his career over at St. Francis of Brooklyn, was always about an 11 point per game scorer. Not a great 3-point shooter, but someone that does give you about a steal per contest as well. I do think that Elon going to be able to force a few more turnovers than our friends over there on the flip side in North Dakota, because they now have TK Simpkins as well. Simpkins comes in from the non-D1 level, 7 steals in his first 2 games of the season. Zach Irvin is able to strike it from 3-point range as well. And for North Dakota, they just don't have a lot of size to be able to take advantage of that Achilles heel of Elon, in that they just don't have a ton down low. They do bring in an Iowa State transfer in Eli King, but Eli King just could not get out there on the floor for Iowa State. He was just a total afterthought at that school. He racked up a lot of fouls, looked very undisciplined in his first game with North Dakota. I feel like Elon just has a little bit more chemistry in general, and they play a little bit of a better brand of defense. I set my total at a 139. Certainly going to be looking at the under. Neither of these teams are very up-tempo. They're both inefficient on defense, but they're both not efficient on offense as well. So I lean to the under, and with Elon, made them a 1-point favorite, taking them outright on the money line, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under to go along with that Elon plus price on the money line. 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board. Oklahoma State plays us to Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State, an underdog of 7.5 to 8.5 points. Your total is between 136.5 and 138. It's at Oklahoma State and 12.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Not necessarily super duper bullish on this Oklahoma State team, but Sam Houston State had to really rebuild on the fly this offseason. They lose their coach in Jason Newton. Qua Grant was really the heart and soul of a Sam Houston State team that was one of the best on defense in all of college basketball. They do bring in a few pieces that should be able to help elevate the team a little bit, like Davon Barnes and company, but this is just not the same team that it was a season ago. They're going to really need to hope that Solomon Doumbia is going to be able to give you a bit more down low. He began his career at TCU a few seasons ago, was a very highly touted junior college transfer that just has never been able to live up to that potential. Jaden Ray is able to give you a little bit of facilitation, but for Oklahoma State, this is just a very good defense-oriented backcourt that has Bryce Thompson, who I think is going to be able to really take off as a scorer this year. Season ago, shot in the neighborhood about 37% from 3, 12 points per contest. Just didn't have a lot of shooting around him, as this was one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball a season ago. But I do think that they're going to be able to build up just a little bit this season. I do expect a pretty solid season as well from Mr. John Michael Wright. Season ago, he had a tough time towards the beginning part of the season, but was averaging double figures when it came to conference play. You've also got Matthew Marsh down low, looked really solid in the season opener. He was able to give the team 9 rebounds. Now with Oklahoma State, this team is going to get a little bit happy with the turnovers. We saw that in their loss against Abilene Christian and Sam Houston State a season ago. They were able to do a solid job of being able to force those turnovers as well. I don't think that they're going to be quite that this season. You did see them have a tough time on offense in that game against Utah Valley, where they lost in overtime after the Bearcats a season ago. They were pretty solid at being able to stroke it from 3-point range. This is just a bunch that they had a lot of turnovers. They're still looking to play very, very deep like they did a season ago. The reason why they had so much success is that they were able to go 9 deep. They're trying that again, but they just don't have the level of talent, in my opinion, to really go that deep. And I think that they're going to get worn out by an Oklahoma State team that is very good and very savvy on the defensive side of things. So did set Oklahoma State as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. When it comes to total, did set it at a 130.5. Sam Houston State last season was a bottom 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. Sam Houston State, when they lost Hooten, they decided to make a change in-house, so they kept a lot of the coaching regime from a season ago, and it looks like they're playing a very similar tempo. So going to be looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Oklahoma State. 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. Boise State is going to be playing us to San Francisco. The Dons are an underdog of 5.5 to 7 points, and Total on this game is 143. Mostly seeing 7. The lone 5.5 I'm seeing is at DraftKings. Pretty much everywhere else is hanging a 7. And at a 7, I'm going to be willing to take the points with San Francisco. I made Boise State a 6-point favorite. With Boise State, they do have a guy that I absolutely love in Tyson Dagenhart, who I think is going to be absolutely tremendous this year. At 6'8", he's able to shoot it well from 3-point range. He's able to give you a block. He's able to do a nice job of being able to pound the glass. This guy is an absolute stat sheet sufferer, though. I know that he's dealing with a little bit of an injury right now, so you do want to be taking note of that. With Dagenhart was not out there night number 1, and that does affect the way that I look at this team just a little bit, because I do think that he's going to be returning to the floor relatively soon, but you got to figure that he's going to be eased back into things because they played a non-D1 school to begin the season. Now, you do bring in Omar Stanley, who was a part-time starter last season over at St. John, so you've got a little bit more depth down low. Christian Ogbo last season was a very good three-point shooter. Chibuzo Ogbo shot about 40% from 3, 11.5 points per contest, so he's really one of the main holdovers from that backcourt of a season ago, along with Mr. Rice. As last year, you had Max Rice be able to shoot about 41% from 3-point range himself, but with the San Francisco team, you've got a lot of guys that they're just so much more savvy on the defensive side of things than they were a season ago. Jonathan Mobo was a part of one of the more slow-tempo styles in all of college basketball at Missouri State, and Mongolian Mike, who comes over from Dayton, we know how slow they are, and with Mongolian Mike, he's 6'8", he's able to pop threes, he's able to give you some facilitation. That's just really hard to match up with. And then Mogbo, he's not a guy that's going to go out there and shoot threes, but he's able to generate some steals, does a very solid job on the glass, and that's in support of Marcus Williams, who you may remember from his time at Wyoming as a freshman. He was one of the best freshmen out there in the Mountain West with like 15 points, 4.5 assists per contest. I absolutely love his game. Robbie Beasley is a good knockdown shooter. You've got Vladimir Mokoski, who's north of 7 feet tall, that's able to do a good job on the glass. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a rough and tumble matchup. San Francisco probably going to be a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. Boise State, they're efficient on offense, but they always really hang their hat on defense, not necessarily an up-tempo team themselves. So I did set my total at 136. I'm going to be diving in on the under. Boise State dealing with a little bit of an injury to Dagenhart, something that I am taking note of. I'm going to be willing to take those points with San Francisco, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under as well. 715, 716 on the betting board. It is UC Riverside, and Riverside is on the road facing up against Portland. The Pilots find themselves as favorites between 9 and 10 points. Total between 149.5 and 150.5. UC Riverside had one of the most ghastly first halves of the entire college basketball season when they scored 13 points against Utah a few days ago, and I think that that's a big reason why this opener of 8.5 has been steamed quite a bit, and I think that people are probably overreacting just a little bit to that bad first half of UC Riverside. I set my line at 7.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with UC Riverside. Mike Magpeo is a really good coach, but he has been dealt a little bit of a rough hand for Riverside. They do lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago. Benjamin Grischetti, he comes in from Incarnate Word. He should be able to give this team a little bit of rebounding, and the guy that you're really going to be looking to help keep things together, that'd be Javon Martinez, a 6'11" big man that has been in the program for a few years. Last season, with his versatility, did shoot 38.5% from 3-point range. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table. And then you take a look at the other side for Portland, and it was just Murphy's Law for this team last season with all the injuries that you had. Tyler Robertson was one of the very few guys that was able to stay out there on the floor last season at about 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Has always been a solid, not great, but solid shooter. And now you've got back in the fold so many of those guys that you were missing from a season ago. Now, they did lose a few guys via the transfer portal, like a Mike Meadows, but you do have Chris Austin back. Austin was a starter 2 years ago, missed the entirety of the 2022-23 season. He's back. Has been able to give the team 14 points in the first 2 games of the season. A little bit of slow going for him, so you got to figure that he's going to be able to get better as the season goes along. You've got Juan Sebastian Gordacito, who saw some unexpected minutes a season ago. Did shoot about 40% from 3, but it's been a little bit slow coming out of the gates as well. And then Yatu Yamanachi Williams, I think, is going to be able to elevate this Portland team down low. But if there's one thing that Riverside is able to do, it's able to bang down low. There's very much a lack of guard play with Riverside with losing Zion Pullen from a season ago. They're really going to be looking to one of their main freshmen and Nate Pickens to help out with regards to facilitation. But I do think that the low post play of UC Riverside is going to be able to hold in there. And Riverside, traditionally a little bit of a slower tempo team. Portland, they're looking to crank things up, and I think that Riverside is going to make this game slow and yucky. I did set my total of 143.5, diving in on the under, and with Riverside, side. Anything of 8 and more, going to be taking the points with them. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. Grand Canyon is playing us to Northern Arizona. The Lumberjacks are between 15.5 to 16-point underdogs. And total on this game, that is between 144.5 and 146. I did set my total at 136.5. I'm diving in on the under. Northern Arizona has always had their defensive woes, to say the least, but they're not necessarily an up-tempo team. And for Grand Canyon, up until last year, this was always a team that they played very slowly. They always did such a tremendous job on defense, while the offense sometimes was a little bit of a work in progress. And they do lose some of those dynamic three-point shooters like Chase McMillan from a season ago as well. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total under when it comes to Grand Canyon in terms of side. Did set them as a 16.5-point favorite, though, because I do think that they're just going to be able to completely suck the life out of a Northern Arizona team that they do have a few nice pieces, like Carson Tout is able to give you about 8 or so rebounds per contest. I think that he's going to be able to hold his own down low, but when it comes to Grand Canyon, I think that they're going to do such a good job of being able to attack a backcourt that for Northern Arizona, it is very much a work in progress, because last season they had Jalen Cone, who was Mr. Do-It-All, was able to give the team right around 16 or so points per contest, and now with him out of the fold, they're going to be looking a lot more to Oakland Ford. And Oakland Ford, during the team's run in the Big Sky tournament, he was able to put in there some very big numbers, but at the same time, I don't know if he's necessarily set for being able to take that nice lift off from a season ago. Meanwhile, you do take a look at this Grand Canyon team, and I certainly do think that you're going to be able to get nice production out of someone like a Tyon Grant Foster, who was the top junior college transfer in all of college basketball a few seasons ago, and came out in the first night of the season, was able to put in their 30 points. Really like what I'm seeing out of him. Down low, they should be able to win this battle as well, even though you do have a few pieces that are returning in the post as well. So I did set this Grand Canyon team as a 16.5-point favorite. I do think that Northern Arizona going to be a little bit dominated, and I do think that Grand Canyon going to be playing a little bit more slowly. 3-point shooting might not be there quite like it was a season ago, but when you still have a guy like Rayshawn Harrison, who was able to put in their 17-plus points per contest the final 25 games of the season, Grand Canyon should be able to go out there and dominate. Willing to lay up to 16 with Grand Canyon, made them 16.5-point favorites, and set my total at a 136.5. Can also dive in on the under. 719, 720 on the betting board. Yale, it's the road face-off against Loyola Marymount. The Mount is between a 1-point favorite to a 1-point underdog. You've got varying favorites across the board, and your total is anywhere between 145.5 and 147. I set my total at a 133. I just don't see where this high total is coming from. Yale is not an up-tempo team, and Yale, in a road/neutral court environment a season ago, was a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. I understand that under this current coaching regime of Loyola Marymount with Stan the Man and company, they have been playing a little bit more up-tempo, but it's not like this Loyola Marymount team, I think, is going to be playing at some sort of a breakneck pace as well. So I'm going to be really taking a look at the under. Alex Merkfeldes, he comes in from CSUN a few seasons ago. Looks like they're going to be relying upon him and Kelly Leu-Pape and their versatility. Both of these guys right around about 6'6", 6'7" in the case of Leu-Pape. Merkfeldes, he's more around 6'8". Both of these guys are able to pop some threes, give you a few rebounds. Leu-Pape, a little bit of the better rebounder, but also in the backcourt, you do have to be questioning what you're going to be able to get moving forward out of Justin Wright, as it does look like he's going to be Mr. Wright after a season ago over at NC Central. He was able to dole out right around a 2.5 assists, 16 points per contest, shot 40+% from three-point range, but because this team does have quite a bit of size, I think that they're going to be playing at a little bit of a slower tempo than a season ago. The Mount did put up 109 points night number one, but that was also against a non-D1 school, and for Yale, they give up 86 points, but once again, that's against Gonzaga. I do think that things are going to be throttled back quite a bit for Yale. You do have John Polidikis, who last season was a 40+% three-point shooter, but Matt Noling is really that guy down low. 13 points, 5 boards. I like what Baz Mbeg is able to bring to the table in the backcourt as well. He's able to give you some facilitation with about 3 assists, 4 boards, 10.5 points, and that is this Yale team. You don't have one guy that's going to go out there and is going to necessarily give you like 25 plus or anything like that, but like all these guys rebound, all these guys are capable passers. They are a very well put together team, but I do think that Loyola Marymount should be the favorite. This is a game out there on the West Coast. Lots of travel for Yale, though they did have to play against Gonzaga, so they were pretty much just stationed out there on the West Coast to begin the season. But I do think that Justice Hill, who comes over from Murray State and LSU, going to do a good job of being able to dole out the ball for the Mountain and having that main facilitator, I think is going to be the difference for Loyola Marymount. Set my total at 133. Once again, I just feel like this is way too high of a total. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with Loyola Marymount, made them the 3-point favorite, so won't take them on a rather pick 'em line, / if I'm able to get like even money on the money line, certainly won't take that to go along with the under. 721, 722 on the betting board. Robert Morris hits the road face-off against Towson. Towson is a favorite of anywhere between 10 and 11 points, and your total is anywhere between 131 and 132.5. And with Robert Morris, I did set them as underdogs of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Towson, they're in quite a bit of transition. They lose Cameron Holden from last year, was really holding it down. I still remember there was a game or two in CAA play a season ago in which he was able to log a triple-double, but they have to go up against a Robert Morris team I think it's a pretty plucky bunch. I like what they brought in via the transfer portal. Justice Williams was a former top 250 recruit, began his career at LSU, never really got a lot of burn with LSU, but I mean, he's looked good thus far. First game, he was able to go out there, had 21 points for Robert Morris, so that's very encouraging. Marquise Hastings over at Central Michigan last year was an 8+ rebound per game guy, and that's going to be big because this is a team that doesn't necessarily have ideal size, but you do have someone in Josh Corbin that I really like as well. Corbin last year shot about 37% from 3, 95% the free throw line. Doesn't do much other than shoot, but he's a really good off-the-ball shooter, and now you've got some nice pieces to be able to help him in regards to his spacing. Now Towson, always a relatively slow and controlled team. This Towson team has scored 70 points or fewer in the first 2 games of the season, so I think that they are very much living up to that. Charles Thompson is going to be a very good low-post player for this team last year at about 7 to 8 rebounds per game. I do think that he's going to be able to win that battle against Hastings down low, but the backcourt, it is in quite a bit of transition right now. They are putting the ball in the hands quite a bit of their younger guys like Dylan Williamson. Williamson is a true freshman. He has come off the bench but has played about 54, 55 minutes in the first 2 games of the season. It is a Towson team that has some relatively good shooting as well. They do bring in someone from the non-Division I level in Tyler Tejada. He is going to be really an explosive player. I believe that he's a true freshman at 6'8". That is going to be looking to be able to elevate this team. Messiah Jones over at Wofford gives the team a little bit more rough and tumble down low along with Chase Parr, but I do think that for Robert Morris, they are going to be able to hold in there. Alfredo Bogiglio, he comes in as a true freshman from Italy, and he has been able to do a nice job of being able to give this team just a facilitation. Not much of a scorer, but very much a pass-first guy. Both of these teams are very unselfish. Both of these teams looking to play slow and controlled. I set my total at a 131.5 as a result. Looking at the under, I think that Towson has a little bit more down low than Robert Morris, but I take a look at the guard play of both of these teams, and I think it's much more even than a lot of people might anticipate. So you're going to be taking a look at the total under, set it at a 131.5, and with Towson, made them 7.5 point favorites, so going to be willing to take double figures with old Bobby Morris. 723, 724 on the betting board. St. Mary's is going to be playing us to Weber State. Weber State underdogs of 15 points. Totals anywhere between 131.5 and 132.5, and with Weber State, I did set them as underdogs of 14 points. So now that we have gotten to 15, this opener was more like 13.5. I am going to be willing to take the points. Weber State, I think, is going to be able to hold in there just enough because they've got such a dominant player that's able to take over the game in Dylan Jones. Jones last year led the team in points, rebounds, and assists with 16.5 points, a steal and a half, 11 rebounds, 4 assists. I think the only major statistical category that he didn't lead the team in was blocks. This guy is absolutely tremendous. Now, that does mean that he needs a few guys around him to be able to step up, but Stephen Verplanken is a nice off-the-ball guard that's able to hit 3. Shot about 42% from distance with about 13 points per contest a season ago. Would like to see a little bit more down low. They've got a guy in Alex 2 who stands right around 6'11", was a starter last year that only gave the team about 4 rebounds per game. If he can give the team like a block, 6, maybe 7 rebounds per game, this team is really cooking with some gas because KJ Cunningham looks like he's going to be able to blow off the ball. And then with St. Mary's, this team just always has that traditional, slow, grimy style that they just make it like you're going to the dentist. It is no fun whatsoever. You've got Aiden Mahaney, who had that nice game against New Mexico. We have seen him really be able to rise up. He's only a sophomore, and he's had 40 points in the first 2 games of the season. But on top of that, this team down low is better than what they were a season ago, because Mitchell Saxon was tremendous down low last season, but we're really seeing Harry Wetzel's be able to take some strides forward, 13 rebounds in the first 2 games of the campaign. Joshua Jefferson is someone that at 6'8" was a little bit of an afterthought last season, only saw about 8 minutes per contest. He's really been able to do a nice job of being able to hit the boards. And then you've got Mason Forbes, who comes in from Harvard. Looks like he's going to be getting a little bit more run. St. Mary's lost a few ancillary pieces from last season, but these guys that have been in the system, they're really stepping up right now. Weber State, a little bit more of a top-heavy team, but I do think that Dylan Jones is going to be able to do just enough to be able to keep Weber State within the number, and Weber State has been taking on a little bit more of a defensive identity ever since Randy Ray stepped down towards the back half of the 2021-22 campaign. So this is a circumstance where I think it's going to be a low-scoring slog, semi-total at a 125 diamond under, and with St. Mary's going to make them a 14-point favorite, so taking 15 with Weber State and the under, 725, 726 on the betting board. UC Davis, it's third face-off against Montana. The Grizzlies of Montana are between 3 and 3.5 point favorites, and your total on this game, finding it at a 143 to a 144. I made UC Davis a 3-point favorite. Flip of favorites here. I'm going to be taking UC Davis outright on the money line. Recognize that for UC Davis, it was a little bit of a just teeter-totterish game that they had against Pepperdine, but all in all, I like this UC Davis team. They return a lot of talent from a season ago, including one of the top scorers in all of college basketball from last year, in Elijah Pepper, who was able to splash in there about 22 points per contest. He's able to give you 5+ boards. He's able to facilitate. I really like his game, and it's all about just finding pieces around him that are able to help facilitate. And Leo DeBrule, it looks like he's going to be able to do so. Not very much of a scorer. Last season was giving out about 2 assists per contest as a little bit more of an understudy. He thus far has seen 42 minutes in the first 2 games of the campaign, has turned the ball over 5 times, but has had 9 assists as well. That is going to be very helpful for having Pepper be able to play a little bit more off the ball. And for UC Davis, they're going up against a Montana bunch that, other than Deshaun Thomas, does not necessarily have a ton down low, so I do think that they are going to be able to have some success with guys like Nico Rokoch, who they bring in. Ade Adebayo, he's been with the program for a very long time. Season ago was able to give the team about 4 boards per contest. Not really going to give you a lot in terms of scoring, but him being able to step up, be a little bit more of a sure-handed guy, and being able to clean up the glass is big. And then under the radar, I do think that Kane Milling, who began his career in Nevada, might be able to take some strides forward as well. Last 2 seasons has given you about 7 points per contest, career about 34% three-point shooter at 6'4". I do think that he's going to be a nice ancillary piece going up against the Montana bunch. I like what you're able to get out of Ada Moody. Ada Moody was very solid, nearly 40% three-point shooter the last few seasons, that was able to step up, have double figures from last season. But Josh Bannon, who at 6'10" last year, gave out 4 assists. He was a double-figure scorer that was able to light it up from three-point range. Not having him in the fold is a big transition for this team, and now you need to have the ball in the hands of Brandon Whitney quite a bit. Season ago, he was able to give the team about 11 points per contest, 2.5 assists. Now he needs to be a little bit more of a primary ball handler along with Ada Moody, and I do think that these guys are going to struggle with that aspect. Meanwhile, UC Davis, a pretty well put together team that I think is going to be able to do a solid job down low and has the best scorer out there on the floor. So I did set UC Davis as the favorite of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. UC Davis played very up-tempo towards the beginning part of the season last year, really tapered off with regards to their tempo in the back half of the campaign, and Montana last year was one of the slower teams in all of college basketball. With Josh Bannon out of the fold, I think they have to slow it down even more. So diving in on the under and UC Davis outright on the money line, 727, 728 on the betting board. It is Nevada, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Washington. Washington is a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, and your total between 147.5 and 149. Set Washington as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. We were talking about this game with Sean Paul. I do think that the size is just going to be a little bit too much for Nevada to overcome. If Nevada still had someone in there like a Darion Williams, so they lost via the transfer portal to Texas Tech, I think I'd be willing to take the points here, but there have been quite a few guys that were in the fold in past years for this bunch that they are now gone. A lot of them are glue guys because you do return 2 of your primary scorers from a season ago. Jared Lucas, who he does great work with regards to both man-to-man and zone defense. Part of the reason why Nevada was able to do a very good job in being able to guard threes a season ago. Keenan Blackshear, he's got all sorts of versatility at right around 6'6". Last season wasn't a great 3-point shooter, but 14 points, 4 boards, 4.5 assists, steal and a half per contest, does everything else for this team. But when it comes to Nevada, you do have to have the questions about the backcourt of this team, the overall shooting, and KJ Himes. Is he ever going to be able to step up? This is a pretty highly touted guy coming out of high school, was limited to just 4 games a season ago due to injury. It looked like he was going to be able to take some strides forward. Is he going to be able to provide a little bit more down low? Because you now have to go up against Braxton Mayo. I don't think he's going to play a ton of minutes in this game. He's been dealing with injuries, so they're looking to work him back after he was able to be a nice 7'1" big man. But finding Kepadog, it looks like he's back in full force. And then, as we were alluding to with Sean, how is the backcourt going to be looking for this team? Are they going to be featuring a lot more of Xavier Wheeler, who's out of the fold first game of the season? Second game, when he was out there against Northern Kentucky, he did have 18 points, but he also had those 5 turnovers that were a little bit ghastly. And I think that the big keys for the team are Paul Mukay, 6'6" combo player that last year at Rutgers shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, gave you like 5 assists, wasn't a primary scorer at 8.5 points per contest, but just did a little bit of this and that. And then Nate Kalmezi, who was really a good scorer at Lamar, didn't do much other than score, but I think that he's going to be a nice elevator for the team as well. I think that Washington just has a few too many weapons for Nevada, and Nevada, we have noticed them under Steve Alford. They've went a little bit slower every single year. Washington is a bit more of a defense-oriented team as well, and I do think that Washington is going to be able to find their footing with their defense. I set this total at 140, diving in on the under, and with Washington willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. We now go to Asheville, North Carolina. This is a neutral court game, 7:29, 7:30. Maryland and UAB do battle in the Asheville Championship. Maryland, a 5.5 point favorite, seeing a straight 5 out there as well. Totals ending between 139 and 140, and at the 5, I'm willing to lay it with Maryland. I set Maryland as a 5.5 point favorite, so 5 or less, that is my buy point. You've got a little bit of a battle of the tortoise and the hare. UAB, they have cranked up their tempo under Andy Kennedy. Meanwhile, with Maryland, they're looking to play a little bit more slow and controlled and really hold it down with regards to their defense. You've got a UAB team that is looking to feature Eric Gaines this season, and Eric Gaines, last season, he was a nice scorer for the team, 11.5 points, 35% three-point shooter. When Jelly Walker was out of the fold, he was really the man for the team, and he does need to cut down on the turnovers a little bit, but I do like that UAB was able to bring in some nice talent by the transfer portal that I do think is going to be able to just take hold. Yaxel Lenborg was a top 10 junior college transfer at 6'9". He's able to pop threes. He's able to give the team some rebounding, and they have been dealing with Alejandro Vasquez as well, being a little bit inconsistent in the first 2 games of the season, but really like his game as well. Flip side for Maryland, this team has Jameer Young, who I feel like is going to be the best player out there on the floor. Last season, just did it all, shot about 32% from 3 with 16 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, but I do think for Maryland, what is going to be key for them is winning the battle on the glass. You got a pair of guys in Dante Scott along Julian Reese last season, combined for about 13 rebounds per game. Maryland, they're always going to struggle with their three-point shooting. Now, they've shot 20.5% from three-point range in the first 2 games. That was a big bugaboo as to why they lost outright to Davidson. I think that they're going to shoot better than 20.5% from three-point range. They have only up to go from there, but I do think that it's fair to question where you're going to be able to get out of Deshaun Harris-Smith. A 6'5", little bit of a do-it-all player coming out of high school. He had a little bit of a clunker of a game in that one against Davidson, racked up 4 fouls, had a pair of turnovers, wasn't necessarily shooting it well from the floor, but you do have guys like a Noah Batchelor, who was a former top 125 recruit that I think is going to be able to elevate as well. So lots of interest in this one, and I always do think it's a little bit easier to slow down the fast team than it is to speed up the slow team, though we have seen UAB be able to speed up some opponents as well. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that because of late game fouling, we are going to see an over in this one. I set my total at a 141.5. I think that this is one of those prime games where it's about like a 6-7 point game with a minute remaining, and then you get the march to the free throw line. So going to be taking a look at the over. I was Maryland, willing to lay 5 and not a half a point more with them. And then this game is also from Asheville, 7:31, 7:32. Davidson and Clemson do battle. Clemson opens up as a 9-point favorite. They're now between 7.5 and 8.5 point favorites. Your total is ending between 139 and 140.5. I set Clemson as an 8.5 point favorite. So now that we're getting down to 7.5, I am going to be willing to lay the number. With Davidson, it was a very nice performance that they had against Maryland. I still have my question marks with this team. You lose Sam Menenga, you lose Foster Lawyer from the season ago. Those were 2 of their primary scorers, and it did feel like they got some shots to go in that game against Maryland that they might not be able to duplicate moving forward. Now, the one thing that I will say about Davidson is that I was not expecting Bobby Durkin to have the impact that he has thus far. He's had 29 points in the first 2 games. This guy looks absolutely awesome. He's shooting 63.5% from 3 as a 6'7", little bit of a wing. I certainly do think that we're going to see a fall off from 63.5% three-point shooting, but comes up must come down. But I do think that he's going to be a big contributor moving forward for this Davidson team. Davidson should be able to get quite a bit down low out of David Skogman, who came over from Buffalo a few seasons ago, but the likes of Connor Kuchera and company in the backcourt, I just don't think that they compare to what you're able to get out of Clemson. They bring in Joe Girard, who's been a double-figure scorer, very sure-handed at the free throw line, is able to give you a few assists, and that really takes the load off of Chase Hunter. Hunter really was able to elevate this Clemson backcourt a season ago when he doled out 4.5 assists, 14 points per contest. Now, you have to question how Girard and Hunter are going to be able to coexist, because in the game that we saw against UAB, it was all about PJ Hall. Without him, they lose that game. PJ Hall at 6'10", 6'11", he's able to shoot like 40% from 3. He's able to give you 6+ rebounds per game. He's able to give you a block. This guy is absolutely awesome. He is going to be the best player out there on the floor, but can you get things sorted out in the backcourt? I do think so. And then on top of that, you just have too much size with this Clemson team with Ian Scheffelen, who's able to give you a few rebounds. You're able to get some good production now out of Jack Clark as well, who comes over from NC State. So I do think that Clemson is going to be able to overwhelm here. I did set them as 8.5-point favorites, and Clemson is not the world's most up-tempo team, but I know over the last 2 years, they've been very efficient on offense, a skoge inconsistent on defense. At Davidson, they've been trying to elevate their tempo just a little bit with the changing of the guard from Bob McKillop. So this is a spot where I'm looking at the over semi-total at a 140.5, so I had a 140 or less looking over, and I'm willing to lay up to 8 with Clemson. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
This starts with 306-541, 306-542. Rutgers is playing us a Bryant. Bryant is between 13.5 and 14.5 point underdogs. Totals between 137 and 138.5, and with Bryant, made them 14.5 point underdogs. I'm willing to lay up to 14 with Rutgers. Bryant just dealing with all sorts of disarray right now. Ironically enough, Phil Martelli Jr. is right now the acting head coach. So you've got Phil Martelli as the acting coach over at Michigan and Phil Martelli Jr. over at Bryant. So acting coaches are pretty much all named Martelli at this point. But I mean, it's a rough situation with what's happening with Derek Grosso, and it's just a rough situation in general when it comes to Bryant, because they've got a lot of talent on the roster and they just have no idea how to utilize it. Because I still remember a season ago, you had guys like Doug Edern and company just glued to the bench, and it really was rhymeless and reasonless. Meanwhile, with Rutgers, they should be able to eat Bryant's lunch down low with Cliff Omarui. Cliff Omarui's had a little bit of a slow start to the season, but season ago, 13 points, 9.5 boards, 2 blocks. He should be able to dominate this game. You do have Earl Timberlake, who's trying to bring Sexy back. Season ago, 6'6" combo player, was able to deliver 8.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 14 points per game, but not necessarily a banger down low. On top of that, with his Bryant punch, you do have Sharif Groves-Bullock, who last season was a nice primary scorer, and for Rutgers, you do lose Caleb McConnell, Paul Mukay, so it's a little bit of a transition in the backcourt. I know Fernandez, first 2 games, has not necessarily looked too tremendous for this team, but what has looked good is Gavin Griffiths, the true freshman at 6'8", who's been able to give this team 29 points the first 2 games of the campaign, at 25 points against Boston U. It looks like he's going to be the second coming in. On top of that, you do have Andre Hyatt out there who's able to contribute quite a bit. Now, they are still dealing with that injury to Muat Mogg, but I think that with Bryant, all the turmoil that they are in right now, that's going to be hurting them. And Bryant, one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball under the tutelage of Grosso, I think that that's going to be scaled back a little bit. But even though that's going to be scaled back a little bit, this is also a Bryant team that it's not very efficient on defense. I did set my total at 140.5, going to be taking a look at the over, and willing to lay up to 14 points with Rutgers. Now here comes my DK Network write-up pick. This is 306-543, 306-544. North Carolina plays us to Lehigh. Lehigh opened up as 24-point underdogs. Find this anywhere between 23 and 23.5. Still seeing one straight 24 out there as I record. Total on this game is anywhere between 154.5 and 156.5. Set Lehigh as 16.5-point underdogs. I think that this is too lofty with this North Carolina team. I am going to be taking a look at the points, and my write-up pick is taking the points with Lehigh. You've got a North Carolina team that, just from a humanistic standpoint, they lose pretty much all but 2 players from last year now. 2 very good players in R.J. Davis, Alonzo Armando Bacot, and Bacot going to be able to control things down low. He's averaged a double-double each of the last 2 years. Saw a little bit of a fall off last year than from 2 years ago, but 25 points, 13 rebounds in that season opener against Radford. He's going to be able to do just fine. Lehigh, they are not going to be able to win that battle down low, but I do think that they can hang relatively at bay with a North Carolina team that, other than RJ Davis, these are all new pieces, and they brought in a lot of guys that played at a slower tempo a season ago. Harrison Ingram, I actually do think is a pretty good fit for this team. He's a 6'7", do-it-all player that'll be able to give you double figures. He'll be able to give you 3 assists, solid but not great three-point shooter. I do like his overall game, but I mean, someone like a Paxton Wojcik coming over from Bryant, you've got your question marks there. Cormac Ryan was part of a Notre Dame team that didn't play any defense whatsoever, and they were just ghastly slow as well, so I just don't know how these pieces are going to be fitting in together. And then you've got a Lehigh team that they bring back 3 out of their top 4 scorers from a season ago, and Lehigh last season was a top 50 team in terms of road three-point shooting percentage, shooting at 36.1% from distance last season. Thus far this season, they have been shooting it at a clip of about 23.5%. That is going to be going northward against a North Carolina team that last year was outside the top 180 in opponents' three-point shooting percentage at home. So I do think that we are going to be seeing some positive shooting variance for Lehigh. And even with them shooting so bad from 3 in the first 2 games, Lehigh hung within single digits against Cornell. They lose by 9 on the road against Penn State. There's absolutely no shame in those losses. And got a guy in Tyler Whitney-Sidney that I like. He last year was able to log for the team about 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2 assists, steal per contest. He's put in there 32 points in the first 2 games of the season. Dom Perlin looks like he's doing a little bit more down low. So he's been a little bit of an inconsistent rebounder, but last year stepped up with 8 points per contest. And then Jalen Sinclair, I do think might be the cheat code for this team as well. Last year did not put in there a lot of scoring, but he was able to do a nice job being able to dole out the ball. He's given out 7 assists to 3 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season. And for Lehigh, they have had 29 turnovers in the first 2 games of the season, but now they go up against a North Carolina team that was in the bottom 40 in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that you're going to see strides forward taken from Jalen Washington, the 6'10" big man that last year was just relatively glued to the bench, but you have to be wondering how all these pieces are going to be coexisting. I think that with North Carolina in transition and Lehigh being a well put together force, they are going to be able to cover this big number. My DK Network write-up pick that is taking the points with Lehigh, and Lehigh a little bit more of a controlled team, and we did see North Carolina play a little bit better with their defense towards back half of the season last year, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game than anticipated. Semi-total at 148.5, diving under, and my DK Network write-up pick that is taking the points with the Lehigh Mountain Hawks. 306-545, 306-546. Fort Wayne playing us to Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce is between 2.5 and 3.5 point underdogs. Totals between 144.5 and 146. Fort Wayne was able to get the job done outright against DePaul. I don't think that we're going to be seeing a replay of that, but I do feel like this is a little bit disrespectful to Fort Wayne. I did set them as 8-point favorites, so I am going to be willing to lay the number with Commerce. This team was at the Division II level 2 seasons ago, and this team just really doesn't have a go-to guy in terms of anything, in terms of scoring, in terms of rebounding, in terms of facilitation, and that's a big issue. Now, Kalen Williams last year shot about 37.5% from 3, 9 points, 2.5 assists per contest, so he's a nice little mixer and shaker, and they do bring in a guy from Bradley in James Weathers, who I really like. He just couldn't really get out there on the floor for Bradley, but he's an upside guy that I think is going to be running the show a lot for this bunch. But I mean, for this Texas A&M Commerce team, is the shooting going to be going northward? Yes, but they have shot thus far 61.5% at the free throw line and 21.5% from 3. They just don't have guys that are able to put the ball in the basket. Meanwhile, for Fort Wayne, they do lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, but they do bring in a nice UIC transfer in Jalen Jackson, who last season he was a part-time starter that had about 7.5 points per contest. Not a great three-point shooter, but a solid one. You also have Quentin Morton Robinson, who he began his career over at Radford. Last season at Fort Wayne was a little bit of an afterthought, and off the bench, 38% three-point shooter that's going to need to have the ball in his hands a little bit more. But on top of that, Anthony Roberts is someone I do think is going to be able to take some strides forward as well. After last year, he was a priority reserve that shot about 38% from three-point range. Fort Wayne is able to stroke it from three-point range. You don't have ideal size of Commerce to be able to take advantage of the Achilles heel of this Fort Wayne team, and that they just really don't have a primary rebounder down low. You're probably going to be looking to someone like Maximus Nelson, stands 6'8", from Appleton, Wisconsin, by the way, to be able to step up, but I do think that for Fort Wayne, they're going to be able to hit some threes and be able to take it to a Commerce team that is a relatively controlled team that I just don't think is going to be able to do their part with regards to this total. I set it at a 142, going to be diving in on the under, and Fort Wayne willing to lay up to 7.5 with them. 306-547, 306-548. James Madison plays host to Howard. Howard is between a 12 to a 12.5 point underdog. Totals between 166.5 and 168.5. We've went too far here. I did set my total at 156.5. I'm diving in on the under. Fully recognize that Howard was one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball season ago, but Howard was up-tempo in the back half of the season. If you look at how they played in non-conference play, they actually weren't a team that was like really running it and gunning it, and you do have a Howard bunch that they looked very good against Georgia Tech. Credit where credit is due, but they have a lot of moving pieces. Now, Bryce Harris is someone that I truly do like for this bunch. He, a season ago, didn't necessarily have his world's greatest season with only about 7 points per contest, but he's a high upside guy that it feels like is starting to find his stride. Shai Odom last year was more of a third wheel for this team, who was able to give the team 4.5 boards, about 10.5 points per contest. He's been able to step up as a nice 6'6" combo player, but I just don't think that it compares to what James Madison is able to provide. And this James Madison team is just able to swarm with like a 9 or 10 deep rotation. Noah Friedel was a primary scorer at South Dakota State a few seasons ago. He has become a nice spot-up shooter for the James Madison team that, as a whole, shooting 39% from three. 4 out of their top 5 scorers are all shooting at least 40% from three. The lone exception is CJ Bickerstaff, a big man that doesn't take threes, who had at Boston College 2 years ago 7 rebounds per contest. Gotta love what you've been able to get out of your lead scorer in Mr. Terrence Edwards. He has been able to give the team north of 20 points per contest. Last year was very good. And then you've got guys like Xavier Brown, Raekwon Horton. Just the depth of James Madison is there. They generate turnovers. They do play quite a bit more up-tempo, and now they've got a guy in Bryant Randleman who hasn't seen a lot of playing time, but when he was over there in the Big South a few seasons ago, was able to do a nice job facilitating. He could be a bit more of a steady man for the team, and I do think that James Madison, a team that was in the top 45 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is going to be able to put the clamps down more on defense, where we are not going to be seeing these north of 160 totals moving forward. I set mine at a 156.5, so I'm going to be diving in on the under of James Madison. Want to lay up to 14 with them. 306, 549, 306, 550. It is Maine, and they hope to not get Maine as they are playing host to Merrimack. The old Merry Men of Merrimack are between 8 and 9 point underdogs with your total between 129 and 130. I set this line at 4. With Merrimack, I recognize that they've got a lot of moving pieces. They lose 3 of their top 4 scorers from a season ago, but I just trust in this Joey Gallo system. No, not the baseball player in Joey Gallo, and I think that he goes a little bit more by Joe Gallo, but I mean, Mr. Gallo, he always plays that amoeba zone. It is just so hard to prepare for in general. Now, I do like the upward trajectory of Maine. Chris Markwood has come in, and he has been able to do some wonders with a team that has been rough, to say the least, over the last few seasons. And for Maine, AJ Lopez has looked very solid this season. Someone who comes over from New Hampshire after he was a little bit of an afterthought there. He's been able to give the team 27 points in the first 2 games of the season. And while he was over at New Hampshire, was about a 40% three-point shooter, but what I think keeps Merrimack in this game, Jordan DeCock. He last season was someone that was able to provide good versatility at 6'5". Didn't score a ton, 7.5 points per contest, but 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 rebounds. He just really embodies what Merrimack is. Merrimack never has been a tremendous three-point shooting team. They aren't going to be a tremendous three-point shooting team this season, but Samba Diallo has some buy-in. He is a well-traveled gentleman that has been at like UMass, Manhattan, a good rebounder, and then you bring in Adam Clark as a true freshman. I know that our good friends that cover the NEC have been very bullish on him. Ryan Peters, who does a great job covering the conference, I know that he highlighted him. He's got 9 steals in the first 2 games of the season. He has been able to do a solid job on that front. And now they've got in the fold Devin Savage as well. Devin Savage began his career at JMU last season, was a nice part-time starter for the team that had a steal and a half per contest. And I do think the Merrimack just going to be making life miserable in general for Maine, being able to generate a bunch of steals. And speaking of generating steals, how about Kellen Tynes? Because he led all of college basketball in steals last year with about 3.3 per contest, 14.5 points per game. This is also a Maine team that isn't going to shoot incredibly from three-point range, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Diallo matches up with Peter Filipowski down low. Last season over at Maine, gave the team 9 points, 5.5 boards, steal per contest. I feel like Merrimack is a more advanced zone defense version of Maine, while Maine is a little bit of a better put-together team. But I think that this is going to be a sloppy Joe's game where there's a lot of turnovers. I think that it's going to be a slog for either team to score, and I think that's exactly how Merrimack wants it. So Merrimack is a 4-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and with the total, set it at a 126. So also going to be diving in on the under. 306-551, 306-552. It is Pepperdine, and they're going to be playing us to Lafayette. Lafayette finds themselves as underdogs, so between 9 and 10 points. Your total on this game is between 142.5 and 144. It is clear that Pepperdine is looking to throttle down the tempo just a little bit this season. So I did set my total at a 143.5. With that 142.5, I would rather have that over rather than the 144 under. So still going to be diving in on the over. But for Pepperdine, a team that was in the top 25 last season in terms of total possessions per game, they've slowed it down just a skosh. And Pepperdine has been dealing with some pieces being out of the fold that you wouldn't expect. You had Javon Porter out night number 1. That was a little bit of a surprise. We have yet to see him take the floor, so I think that you just need to consider him out until further notice. But Ethan Anderson, who I still remember at USC during the 2019-20 season as freshman, doled out 4 assists per contest, he's been able to give this team a little bit more stability. They have slowed things down, but they've been more efficient on offense, with Houston Mallett chipping in their 41 points in the first 2 games of the season. You've had him shoot 44% from 3. You've had good 3-point shooting performances out of Malik Moore, who a season ago, Moore was a 6th man for the team that shot 42.5% from 3, but only 5 points per contest. He's getting many more open looks this season. Meanwhile, for Lafayette, this is traditionally one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. They are looking to make things slow, grimy, and they did actually a really good job of that against UCLA. They were unable to pull off the outright win, but they really gave them some fits. They did lose a few pieces in the offseason, like CJ Fulton is now out of the fold. He was a nice Sachi suffer for this bunch, but at the same time, they do a nice job bringing back Justin Vanderbond, a 7-footer who began his career at Boston College. It appears as though he's been able to take some strides forward when their primary guys, and Kyle Jenkins from a season ago had 9.5 points, nearly 6 boards. He's back in the fold as well. And then the guy that they really need to be able to continue to take strides forward is Devin Hines. Devin Hines was a understudy for the team a season ago. He's now seeing real minutes, and he's been able to take advantage. 15 points in the first 2 games of the campaign. I do think that you're going to see Pepperdine play a little bit faster. I do think that this is a game that is going to be warranting some late game fouling, which is why I still do take a look at the over just a little bit in this one. I think that maybe we've shaded down this total just a shade too much, which is why I'm going to be taking a look at the over on a 143 or less. But with Pepperdine, going to set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I like this Lafayette system, and I do think that it's going to give Pepperdine, who's right now dealing with that Porter injury, some fits. So going to be taking a look at the over and going to be willing to take the points with Lafayette. 306-553, 306-554. Southern Indiana is going to be playing against Chicago State. Chicago State is an underdog of 4.5 points. Your total is between 138 and 141. So all over the place with regards to this total, and I set Southern Indiana as 3.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take 4.5 with Chicago State. Now, Chicago State, I forget the name of the Twins, but they're trying to bring in the top 20 guys from a season ago, and right now they have yet to be able to get a waiver to play, and that would really make things interesting with Chicago State, a team that we all know is never going to get a shot at the NCAA tournament. But for Chicago State, what has been good for them, Wesley Cartett Jr., a former top 200 recruit who has come in and been able to give the team 29 points in the first 2 games of the campaign. A season ago, he had 16.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I really love what he's able to bring to the table, and they go up against a Southern Indiana team that pretty much lost 5 other top 6 scorers from a season ago. They're really relying upon A.J. Smith to be able to give the team a bit of something after he just did not see minutes for the team a season ago, but was within the system. They looked to Florida A&M transfer Jordan Tillman to be able to elevate after he was really their top scorer a season ago. Florida A&M, 2.5 assists, was able to chip in their 10.5 points per contest, but last year, Southern Indiana was one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Tillman shot about 22.5% from 3. Now, part of that was because he was forced to take bad shots because there was absolutely nothing at all around him, but you need to have some of these up transfers like Nate Hiddle, Kyron Powell that started out at bigger conferences to be able to step up down low because this team does not have a lot of rebounding to speak of. Meanwhile, you've got Jashawn Corbett, who I like for the Chicago State team, 12.5 points, 8 boards last season. He was able to log right around 9 boards per contest. Not necessarily a great 3-point shooter. And for Chicago State, this has been a team that over the last few years, they have slowed down just a little bit. They become a bit more of a defense-oriented team and really need A.J. Neal to step up. A former top 250 recruit, began his career, Long Beach State has never really been able to develop. I do think that Southern Indiana on their home floor should be the favorite, but I think that this is going to be a game that's very tight. Southern Indiana has been able to find a way to put the ball in the basket at the D1 level since a game against Michigan State a couple nights ago, but that said, I do think that this is going to be a game that warrants a little bit of late game felling, so I am going to be taking a look at the over, set my total at a 141.5, and with Southern Indiana, trying to make them a 3.5 point favorite, so taking 4+ with Chicago State to go along with that under 306, 555, 306, 556. Baylor is going to be playing against Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb between 22.5 and 24 point underdogs. Your totals between 147.5 and 148.5. Could only make Baylor a 19-point favorite. I'm going to be taking the points with Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb, just year in and year out, is a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I do think that they're going to be holding up against a Baylor team that looked very good against Auburn night number 1. And these freshmen, they've got so much athleticism. If you saw the show that was being put on by Misi, their young guy that was able to put in there in that game against Auburn right around about 10 points. He had some nice highlight reel play. Uwe's Misi, I think, is going to be a guy that's going to be a game wrecker moving forward. And then Mario Little, 6'4" guard that's able to stroke it from 3-point range. I think that he's got a lot of ability as well. And I mean, it really plays well to Langston Love along with Ray J. Dennis. Ray J. Dennis has had the ball in his hands quite a bit, and I feel like a lot of people anticipated he would struggle. And the 11 turnovers in the first 2 games, a little bit unsightly, but I mean, this is a guy that played well when he was at Boise St a few seasons ago, so he's played at a high level of basketball. Jacoby Walter as well has looked really good to begin the season, but for Gardner Webb, this team does a nice job of just team rebounding in general. They do lose some of their top rebounders and just overall shot blockers from a season ago. Let's hear Kareem Reed along with Lafayette Ducille. These were 2 guys that were very solid down low. Both of those guys are on the fold, but what I like is that you've got the main control man, Lucas Stieber. Stieber is not a guy that's going to give you a lot of scoring, even though he shot about 36.5% from 3 last year, but last year, even though he only scored about 4.5 points, impacted the game with a steal, 3 assists per contest. He just does a good job playing defense, doling out the ball, and getting it in the hands of guys like a Julian Sormaro, who last season was able to give the team about 8 to 9 points per contest. One of the better 3-point shooters for Gardner Webb team that they do have issues at the free throw line. They do have issues with their outside shooting, but I do think that DQ Nicholas is going to be able to elevate that. Last season, 12.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, about a mid-33 point shooter. Gardner Webb doesn't have quite as much down low as they did a season ago, but Caleb Robinson looks like he's going to be able to take over after he began in his career at the non-D1 level and was more of a 6th man a season ago. So I do think that Gardner Webb going to be able to make this a little bit more of a defensive, yucky game. Set my line at 19, so I'm going to be taking the points with Baylor. Gardner Webb, I don't think is going to allow overly many points in this game to Baylor. I also don't think that they're going to be doing their part with regards to a total over as well. Set my total at 137, so diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Gardner Webb. 306, 557, 306, 558. Georgia is playing us to NC Central. NC Central, an underdog of 20 to 20.5 points. Totals anywhere between 144.5 and 146, and I did set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with NC Central. Now, with NC Central, they do lose a lot of their good backcourt from a season ago, but I've got my question marks with Georgia. I go back to that opening game against Oregon, and they were able to put up 70 points in that game, but that's merely because the referee was calling a foul if the guys were breathing wrong, and that's a little bit of an issue. They did light it up against Wake Forest, but Wake Forest, one of the worst Power 5 defenses that you're going to find out there. Russell Chaywa should be able to elevate the team down low. He's been able to give the team 15 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season, but you really don't have anyone else that does really an amazing job down low. Jalen DeLoach comes in for VCU. He's an okay rebounder, and Noah Thomason, he's an up transfer that last season was Mr. Do-It-All at Niagara with like 18 points. He was able to dole out 3 to 4 assists, was able to give you a few boards, and should be able to play very well with Abdul Rahim in the backcourt. Jabari Abdul Rahim last season shot about 38.5% from 3-point range, but for the NC Central team, they do a good job of being able to look at the non-D1 level, try to bring in some transfers that they think are going to be able to fit this system, and they feel like they've got one in Po Boy King. Po Boy King, and that's his actual name, has been able to give the team 36 points in the first 2 games of the season. Looks like a good primary scoring option for this team. And then they bring in Emmanuel Izabuner, who began his career at High Point, played 4 years over there. He's a good, solid rebounder that has seen his rebounds per game elevate in all 4 years in college. Not necessarily a primary scorer, but is able to do a good job on the glass. And then you got Fred Cleveland Jr. who's been in the system for a few years. Looks like he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. I like what I've seen out of him after he's had injuries, hurt him throughout his career at North Carolina A&T before coming over to NC Central. And I do think that you're also going to be able to get just enough as well out of Jadarius Harris. Jadarius Harris, last season, he was a little bit more of a off-the-bench, just spark plug shooter in general. He shot 59% from three-point range a season ago. Now, that was on 22 threes, but this guy is able to light it up from distance, and I do think that is going to be able to keep NC Central at bay against a Georgia team that, quite frankly, I feel like there's a lot of moving parts with. I did set my total at 139. I do think that NC Central going to be looking to play a little bit more through the post with Isa Booner and company because they did lose a lot of their tough flight guys from a season ago in that backcourt, including Eric Boone, who was able to do such a good job, along with Justin Wright as well. So, going to be taking a look at the under, and with Georgia, could only make them 15.5 point favorites. So, taking a look at the points as well. We wrap things up with 306-559, 306-560. Indiana is going to be playing us Army. Army is between 23 and 24.5 point underdogs. So it's between 133.5 and 134. With Indiana, set them as 23.5 point favorites. So now that we're getting up to 24 plus, I am going to be willing to take the points. I am with Sean with this Indiana team. Was underwhelmed by them night number one. I think the biggest question mark you have is the backcourt. Now, Trey Galloway last season was a north of 40% three-point shooter that in that opening game against Florida Gulf Coast. He was one of the biggest reasons why they staved off an upset. He had 16 points in that one, and I like the overall offense that you got out of Malik Renew, but I don't know if he and Khalil Ware are able to coexist at the same time. You got a very talented guy in Mackenzie Mbakpo, who was a top 20 recruit, but he looked a little bit skittish night number one. It felt like he was a little bit out of place as well. And then Xavier Johnson has always had his turnover woes in college basketball. Meanwhile, this is an Army team that's very makeshift. They canned their coach in the offseason, and really Charlie Peterson, great name, is the lone guy that returns for a season ago. Peterson was solid down low with about 5 boards, 8 points, 2 assists. Nice stat sheet suffer at 6'9", but you're going to need to get a little bit more scoring from the outside because that's a lot of what they lost from a season ago. Jared Cross looks like he's going to be that guy. Shot 41% from 3 last year, but only splashed in there 3 points per contest in an elevated role. He's been looking pretty solid. And then you've got Kevin Davis. He has been in the program for quite a while, but it's just never really seen a lot of playing time. In the playing time that he's seen thus far, he's been able to give the team 13 points in the first 2 games of the campaign, and this is going to be probably one of those Army teams that they're going to be trotting out their hockey-style line shifts because they do have a lot of depth, but they don't necessarily have guys that have extraordinary talent or anything like that. Let's call it what it is. It is a military academy. It's not like they're going to be able to bring in guys by the transfer portal, but Army has been a team that in recent years has been going a little bit more up-tempo. We saw them held to 44 points in that game against Stony Brook. That was a little bit less than terrific. And Indiana playing a little bit more defense-oriented, but I do feel like this total is a little bit too low. I do think that Army going to be looking to take a few more threes moving forward. So I did set my total at 137.5. Here at a 134. I'm going to be willing to go in on the over. And with Army, set them as 23.5 point underdogs. So we'll take 24 plus with them. And that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Sean Paul of the Field of 68 along with the Action Network for joining me in live segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, that is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger. Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.